It's actually, there's something we're doing now that's a little bit different for us. That's maybe I'll pivot back to the media aspect of it, but in terms of how we position the brand to an emerging audience has been very much front of mind. We actually just launched a new campaign last month. It's called "It's a Big Flex." You may have seen our executions out there here and there, but historically, we've always used humor in campaigns. We've always featured our points of difference versus other airlines. What was a little bit different about this one is because the way the airline industry is evolving, you have customers who have flown for decades, right? I'm one of them. Those of us who are kind of Gen X and maybe older millennial or on that end of the spectrum. And then there's an emerging flyer base as well, which of course is Gen Z and young millennial, or zillennial as some call. So historically, we'd always been geared toward that more traditional, what we call our maintain audience. With this campaign, we actually did two sets of executions, and one is focused on the maintain audience, and then the other is focused on growth. And they're the same points of difference, right? It's still around bags fly free and ease of booking and the strength of the loyalty program. Those are compelling to both groups, but how you communicate that is probably different. The way that we run an ad for somebody in the maintain group is going to be different than growth. So we produced two sets, and the growth strategy was really interesting because we were able to leverage some influencers and people that I don't know who they are, but a lot of people who they're targeted toward you. And then that is how we showed up for the campaign across channels. From a media standpoint, there's also an implication, certainly, of where those air. So we've evolved a little bit more toward an upper funnel approach and some awareness building tactics, more so than what we've done in the past. And even though that's sort of like kind of the old school way of doing it, that was actually deliberate in that we want to create broader awareness of the brand among younger populations because they just don't know Southwest as well as maybe some folks who have flown us for years. So that was a fun way to go and build a campaign around two different targets, not just creatively, but also in terms of where we plant the media.
I love that. I love thinking about same product, right? Totally different targets. So we're going to actually get to showcase the messaging here and think about whether the first or second one is the maintain or growth, but finding through various media channels as well, social and otherwise, which we'll talk about in just a minute.
You bet.
So maybe we can roll those two ads.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're good.
I'm checking 2 free bags on Southwest. She is coming with me. That's a pack hack. See you when I drop, Chris. It's swag.
2 bags fly free. That's a big flex.
And then
I checked 2 bags on Southwest for free. I pack a lot of shampoo. Can't get this for 3 ounces. This is full body, baby. He gets it. Good job, brother.
2 bags fly free. That's a big flex.
So it's basically two different versions of a similar ad promoting the same thing, right? It's both around bags fly free and the convenience that provides you at no additional cost, unlike pretty much every other airline. But with the first one you saw, that's the young man who has most of the dialogue there is Swag, who's a pretty well-known gamer, has millions of followers across platforms. It's kind of a subtle nod. If you know who he is, you know who he is. We don't like call him out with a super or anything. And then that also played on gaming. Obviously, is big with Gen Z, and actually not just Gen Z, but primarily. And then also the sort of interactive nature of gaming and how even though people are alone when they game, they also spend a lot of time together. And in that case, he was getting to pack his game system, which, of course, you can only do if you're going to check the bag. And then in the latter one, it's again around free bags, and it was around the ability for somebody to pack a whole bottle of shampoo. We hired that guy obviously because of his hair. He's got great hair, deeply envious. But again, targeted toward a different group of people. But in both cases, you can see where there's an interaction between a couple of principal actors, and the person who's taking the action is sort of that, you mentioned maverick, but they're sort of like doing things a little bit differently. There's somebody who garners attention in a positive way. So all that was accounted for in the brief and the script, and I think our agency, in partnership with our brand team, brought that to life.
And I love in both creatives, you see like Southwest core tenets reflected, right? Of like humor, differentiation, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, the humor is a very popular, working in ad testing. Humor is a really good way to stand out. It is a balance because you don't want to be so dynamically funny that people don't know what the ad was about or aren't inspired to maybe take action. But it is a hallmark of what we've done historically. A funny story, the kid, his first line is, "She is coming with me," and he's rolling out with his bag. And in initial edits, it sounded like he was saying, "Shit's coming with me." And we were like, should we leave it in? Because he's not saying that. And that'll actually get a lot of talk value if it sounds like we were able to slip the S word into mass media ad. But we erred on the side of caution, which is probably smart.
I love it. So shifting gears a little bit, another thing will not surprise you that we talked quite a bit about was competitive intel, airline, travel industry today, like the whole post-pandemic world. And you had so many insights about how Southwest has had to pivot. I'll let you fill in the rest of the descriptor words. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that journey in the last 4 years.
Sure. Well, and it's probably some aspects of it that you all have experienced too, just as travelers. The world has changed over the last 4 years as it relates to air travel. It's still, there's more demand for air travel than there's ever been, but it is predominantly leisure travel as opposed to business travel. Now, that was always the case that the majority of people, at least on the Southwest flight, were flying for leisure as opposed to business. Maybe call it a 65-35 split in favor of leisure. Now, on any given day, you might see it more like 80-20 or 90-10. And that's two things. One, people are flying, they're taking more trips, they're doing more fun things. I think maybe the pandemic gave all of us some pause on, hey, man, you only get one life and we should take advantage of it. So let's get out there and do some things. So all of the airlines, not just Southwest, really capitalized on that as an opportunity to fill seats. But it is taking up, they're taking up seats that may have been occupied by business travelers in the past, because there's certain types of business travel, day trips. When was the last time anybody here was on a day trip where you left in the morning, came back at night? Unless you have to, you don't really do that anymore because you just do it over Zoom or Teams. Even single overnight trips have been reduced significantly. Some of that has been, the place has been taken by leisure trips for the people that don't have any qualms admitting to their boss that they're actually taking a combined business leisure trip. We're seeing more and more of those, but it's not making up for the overall volume of business travel that we had prior to the pandemic. So that's a big change, and it's one that everybody's experiencing, but it's evolved how we're all going out and trying to drive demand, because the way the airline industry works, your goal is to get to a certain load factor, a certain percentage of the plane you want full. Let's say your load factor target is 85%, because you have to generate the revenue that ties back to 85%. It means across flights all day, 15% of the seats are not occupied. We actually have been able to talk to business travelers and ask, why are you not traveling as much? And they just tell us that they just don't have as much reason to do it. It just isn't as prevalent in their mind. So what we have to do is we have to go out and drive demand and convince leisure travelers to do that, because in the past, you'd get to that certain load factor and the latter stage of that flight, maybe the day before, it would fill in with business travelers who are not spending their own money, found out they have to travel tomorrow. We're not seeing as much of that. So now you have to fill those planes further out, get to a higher load factor with leisure traveler, and spend more money in the upper funnel to try to drive demand to convince people to travel. So that's all changed. That dynamic has been very prominent in terms of the last 4 years. Who knows how long it'll go on? Who knows if business travel will ever come back the way that it once was? But those are one of the things that we're all dealing with.
We also were talking about, we both, obviously, your eyes especially on the competitive set, right? And a lot of other airline brands are coming back to linear, quite frankly, hotels as well, right? And you shared a little bit about your changing media strategy, right, to differentiate yourself. And I think you mentioned reach and frequency. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, and that's actually been a really fun part of it. We have evolved a little bit more. We're doing more what I call upper funnel, or more kind of network or traditional television buying. Obviously linear, so you'll see us on a game or on a broadcast of a television show, but also streaming. If you meet a certain target, you might see a Southwest ad. If you are like me and you have the ad-supported version of Hulu, you might see our ads. So we're doing a lot of that. At the same time, we're also evolving our social strategy. And we've only recently, we started TikTok actually last year, got incredible engagement from TikTok, especially relative to other social channels, and we continue to invest there. And that's been fun because the message obviously is going to be a little bit different for the linear and streaming than it is for social, because there are different audiences. And like I was saying earlier, we have a campaign that addresses that.
So thinking social, TikTok, right, all of these different media opportunities or options can drive cohesion, but also you are operating in a fragmented landscape. So thinking about that fragmentation, like what are some of the challenges and what are some of the opportunities that you're taking advantage of in that?
So I think that the fragmentation probably is the challenge, right? Because you have to in order to have your message be received as resoundingly and as broadly as you want, you have to be in a bunch of different places now at once, where it used to be not quite as complex. So there's a lot to think about there. I think what we've been able to do, at least on the social front, is we've been able to lean in more heavily on organic social. So we think about it as, we separate it as paid versus organic. Paid is exactly what it sounds like, and then organic is the stuff that our teams internally come up with, and we'll just post that on our Instagram, with our Instagram ID, or on TikTok or Snapchat. It's another good one for us. And we spend a lot of time sort of monitoring what's happening in the world, like a lot of brands do, and then if there is a chance to sort of capitalize on a meme or build a communication around something that is particularly relevant and drop that into TikTok, sometimes you can get a lot of eyeballs and a lot of interest in that without having to pay for it. So the social is kind of the double-edged sword, in that you have to invest more than we've ever had to invest in evolving channels, but it also gives you the option to do some stuff for free. And there's also a little bit more margin for trial and error. You can try things, and if they don't resonate as well as the thing you did last week did, you just move on. As long as nobody's offended, 24 hours later they probably don't remember. So that's how we've been able to diversify. We're forced to.
Back to the tenets of Southwest, right? You mentioned, right? But Southwest is actually the airline, really, that's poised to flourish in an environment that needs to be dynamic. You mentioned the word nimble.
Yeah.
Is this a cultural thing? Is it a strategy thing? Is it all of the things? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think it's just a good fit. I mean, I do think we, to a greater degree than a lot of our competitors, we put a lot of, we've had campaigns around it. We put a lot of importance around transparency and being genuine and being real. And that's one of the kind of cardinal sins of social advertising in particular is that if it feels too much like a TV ad, or feels too sort of manufactured or curated, it actually has the reverse effect of being something good. So the fact that the brand has the perception of being strong in those areas, I think that helps facilitate our identity in social media in particular.
When we talked, you actually gave some credit to the fact that we're talking about air travel at all, right? And every single one of us in the room have experienced both the joys and tribulations, right, of air travel. And Southwest, to no surprise, takes the humor approach as well. Can you share a little bit more about that? I just thought it was an interesting. You're the one that made the call out.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because airlines in general, you're seeing more. We have competitors who have never used TV, for example, or not have used TV very sparingly. You're seeing more and more of that. So it is more. There's more out there, but it also gives us a chance to continue to differentiate. We have a history of using humor in campaigns. We have a long-standing tradition of a theme, Want to Get Away, which is actually the name of a fare product, and it's also commercials that many of you have seen where you capture somebody in their want to get away moment. And those have always resonated, done very well in clinical testing and actual people receiving them. So, and that still feels like us, even though maybe in some ways the world and the industry have gotten a little bit more serious. The fact that we can still harken back to having a good time and trying to make people laugh while we're communicating messages is a cool thing to be able to do.
I think you've taken such a strong position in the market that literally no one else has followed that humor path, at least that I'm not aware of. I think many of us have been on flights where someone on a Southwest flight sang or made jokes. I've never been on another airline flight where that happened. So I think
and that's another thing. That's where the humor fits, right? Because that's an extension of the hospitality training that we give all of our employees, especially the frontline employees. That's part of their recurrent training. And it doesn't mean, and it's not prescriptive. It's not like, well, make sure you sing a song every third flight or anything like that. It has to be sort of off the cuff and sincere, and people have to mean it. But they do it with great regularity, and we hire people who have those attributes of their personality. So it complements the way we show up in front of customers when the experience actually feels like the same brand that you saw in the ad.
it's such an interesting segue to a core thing that you have contributed and continue to contribute at Southwest. So I think of your employees as part of your product, right? They're definitely a differentiator in that experience. But when we were catching up, Jonathan talked to me quite a bit, and it was surprising to me to hear about the role that you play in actually building products that are brought to market.
Yeah.
And when you explained it to me, it sort of made sense, but I know everyone will be interested to hear your strategy there and how you carry those Southwest Airline tenets through product as well.
Sure. Yeah, so I think we're unusual in that as a marketing department, in that we're not only responsible for the brand and media and how we communicate to the customer. We also have the loyalty program, Rapid Rewards, within marketing, and then we're focused on building products. It could be fare products or ancillary products that appeal to customers. So we actually have all that, and it's really all in the spirit of that's where the revenue comes from. Marketing is responsible for driving demand to put butts in seats, and then the loyalty program generates revenue through membership and selling co-brand credit cards and points to partners and things like that. And then ancillary products, for us, we have a couple products called Early Bird and Upgraded Boarding, which are designed to get you a better spot in line when you board. We're unassigned for seating, so there's a premium on getting a better boarding position. So we sell opportunities to do that. But that all lives in the same domain, and I think our focus around product building has always been, we want customers to give us more money, but we're not going to ask you to pay for something where if you don't, it somehow erodes the experience. So in other words, you're always, if we're going to ask you to pay more, it's to get something extra, as opposed to asking you to pay more to do something that you should be able to do anyway, like check your bag. That's a great example. So that's always kind of the lens we look at things through. It's not, we don't want to appear to be nickel and diming. That's another thing that people give us a lot of credit for, bundled fares and things like that. But then we also want to make sure that if we ask you for more revenue or more money, you're in fact getting something measurably better out of the experience than you would if you hadn't bought it. And if you don't decide to give us anything beyond what you paid for the fare, what you redeemed your Rapid Rewards points for the seat, you still get a great experience with hospitality and generally on time and a good all-in value for what you paid for.
Tell us a little bit more about that journey to launch a new product. You mentioned the example of use points or use dollars right?
Yeah.
So you.
Yeah, so we actually just launched a program called Cash Plus Points, where you can use to redeem for a flight. You can historically you could always use just cash or just Rapid Rewards points. Now you can use a combination of those, and it's good for people who are maybe have a good solid bank of points and maybe don't want to pay as much cash for the fare that they've chosen, and you can do that. And that is just another expression of flexibility. I think the root of the brand campaign brief was that customers are just becoming increasingly resigned to this environment where everything is a hassle, especially in the travel industry, and you have to jump through all these hoops. So it gives us sort of a base in which to build products which go against that, and Cash Plus Points is an example.
So the final big topic I wanted to dive into is around AI, and I was asking the question around how does AI influence your branding strategy, but you also circle back to product. So just tell us a little bit about how Southwest and how you specifically are using AI in the years ahead.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of it remains to be seen. We're using AI today. It's primarily on, I would say, the employee side. We're using AI techniques to try to help simplify operational procedures because there's so much of a premium on turning planes faster and making things more efficient on the day of travel for our frontline employees. So a big investment of time and resource there. Closer to home on the marketing side, we're using a tool, maybe I don't know if you guys are familiar with Persado, but it's effectively an AI tool that helps you with writing copy, whether it's in an email or even a push notification or something like that. Rather than have your copywriters, sit up and create 150 versions of the same thing, the Persado can generate that. You still need the human copywriters to use their brain to determine which is the best one and leverage their talent that way. But it just makes their life a little bit easier and makes a more efficient process when it comes to doing something like that. So those are some examples. I think on the customer-facing side, that is really just now evolving in travel. But it's hard to imagine a world in a few years or even in a couple of years where there isn't some sort of generative AI inspiration tool for booking. In fact, Expedia actually just launched one which they're still playing with. I think one of our competitors out on the West Coast has got one that's in very nascent form right now, but you can tell people are trying it. And it makes sense because a lot of us who travel frequently, or even if you don't travel that much at all, you need it just as much. It's like, I know I want to go to Florida, but I don't know if I want to go to Tampa or Fort Lauderdale or Miami or Jacksonville. So then I can use a tool that says, I want to go somewhere that has beaches and mangrove trees nearby, and I can earn Marriott Bonvoy points, and they've got 3-star restaurants. That's all a good tool needs to come up and generate a bunch of different ideas for you. So it feels like that's just a matter of time, and I would love for us to continue to invest energy in looking at stuff like that.
It probably drives partnerships and products.
Very much so.
companies.
Yeah. I mean, it's an engagement too. That's the other thing. It's like for if you're like us, where you really rely heavily on people coming to the Southwest channels to book. Like you can't book a Southwest flight through Expedia. You have to come. In most cases, you have to come to Southwest in order to book. So the amount of time and the degree of engagement that you have with our app or with our website is critical. So again, a good Gen AI booking tool, I think, would help solidify that and even grow it and make people like us more. But it's got to be good. That's the other part of it. Is that a lot of these, you feel like there are a lot of people that are putting the cart before the horse and getting tools out there that aren't quite ready for prime time or maybe have some kinks. I think the people who maybe put more of a premium on quality versus speed might end up winning the race.
And I think you care a lot about quality, even though there's a humor component, right?
Well, yes.
Do we have time for a couple of questions?
But I wanted to double click on something you mentioned about travel. So I remember during the pandemic, business meetings they talked about. I happened to be at a DMO at the time that was happening in New York City. You couldn't get close to that. However, what some of the hotels saw was that people had other travel needs. So they're going to games, they're traveling to these sports. Have you uncovered any other areas when these guys have leisure travel where you're finding an opportunity to speak to your audience?
Yeah, I think the combined business leisure opportunities that I referenced, I think those are a big one. I think where we've really tried to develop the greater opportunities is not as much about different occasions, but just finding a broader swath of people and just appealing, using demand techniques that reach a broader audience to get a greater group of people who are considering us. And then there are also things that are market specific for us. So they're particular, like Denver, for example, is our biggest market. So that's a good example where we've tried to tap into more occasion-based things. People who are looking for experiences outdoors or want to go skiing or just want to fly through Denver to get to somewhere else. We've done some occasion-based focused efforts around trying to acquire more people.
So you mentioned before about the load factor, and then just mentioned that I think we all know that you cannot buy Southwest tickets on any other platform. You have to go direct. After COVID, did you ever reconsider that? What's the reasoning behind you have to go to direct and can't go to any other booking site?
Yeah, I think we're just stubborn. No, actually, so a couple of things. It's a fantastic question, and it gives me an opportunity to provide caveats. One is you actually can book Southwest Air now through Chase Travel. So if you have a Chase credit card and you're part of the Ultimate Rewards program, so we're there, and we should be priced competitively. Let me know if we're not. And then just this week, we launched Google Flights. So you could always see us in Google Flights, but it would always say you got to go to the website, and our logo was grayed out. Now we're right in there with everybody else. So that actually just started yesterday, which of course is meta-search. It's not a booking platform, but it's a way to drive people to Southwest. So a couple exceptions, just in this is since November that we've been doing that. So I would say our perspective is evolving, but I think we'll continue to go slowly into that because what anybody in the industry who sells through traditional OTA would tell you is they wish they could get out of it to some degree. It's almost like the needle's already in. They can't stop doing it altogether, and the terms of their agreements are so in many cases onerous where they just don't have the ability to back out or make it work the way they want to. So we have the advantage of being able to sort of measure twice and cut once. I don't know that we'd ever, we'll see. I mean, never say never, right? But I would describe our thinking in that area as having evolved. But again, we would stop short of doing what our competitors, to the degree to which our competitors do it.
One final question.
Abigail.
Yes, sir.
Can you share top 3 changes that you have brought into your loyalty program post-COVID?
Top 3 changes. Okay. Well, yeah, so the first one is reducing the number of flights that it takes to make A-list and A-list preferred. We just did that last year. We found ourselves having to give people a bunch of promotional status because nobody was flying the commensurate number of trips that you needed to take in order to get there. And that was actually another example where we sort of zigged when everybody else zagged. Most people were actually moving the bar up in an effort to really shrink the program. And we actually moved it down to make it easier to do that. I would say cash plus points is definitely another one that we just implemented that we're excited about, that customers seem to be really excited about. And then the third one, just because it's top of mind for our A-list preferred, if you guys have flown Southwest, you know we used to mail out paper drink coupons. And everybody loves those. It's like, oh, I never get my drink coupons anymore. Well, printing is expensive, and the program's a lot bigger than it used to be, and there's just a cost there. So now we fulfill those through the app. Now the flight attendants have tools on board where they can scan your app, and then if you've got drink coupons to use, then yeah, that's how we do that. So there's a few of them. Yeah, we've definitely had to move quickly. I'd say the loyalty program is because we made several changes within COVID that were sort of, again, try to be conducive to people's flying habits and meet them where they are. But we continue to try to evolve there.
Awesome. Jonathan Clarkson, thank you so much.